You tap your phone, you get your coffee, you board your flight, you unlock your front door. I mean, for the last 2 decades, the narrative around convenience has basically been this straight line pointing up.
Right,
You
totally.
trade a little bit of your data or, you agree to let a camera scan your face, and in return, the friction of daily life just kind of melts away. It's a clean, simple transaction, right? But what happens when the exact same biometric scan that lets you breeze into the airport VIP lounge is suddenly used to lock you out of the grocery store?
Well, it fundamentally breaks the social contract we think we have with our technology.
Mm.
We are so conditioned to believe that frictionless systems are designed to serve us, to anticipate our needs.
Yeah.
We rarely stop to consider that a system capable of perfectly anticipating your needs is also capable of perfectly restricting your movements.
And that is exactly where we are heading today. Welcome to this deep dive into the source material. We have a genuinely fascinating mission today, pulling from a heavily discussed 2026 academic paper by Dr. Michael R. Williams from Governor State University. The paper is titled, Leaving Utopia: How Disenchanted Dissenters Defect from the ABCD System into Parallel Communities.
It is a remarkable piece of scholarship. Dr. Williams has achieved something quite rare here. He isn't just offering an analysis of financial technology or like a critique of surveillance.
Right.
He is blending hardcore information systems research with the sociology of apostasy.
Apostasy, like leaving a religion.
Exactly. The deep structural psychology of how people leave deeply ingrained religious or ideological belief systems. He frames unplugging from a financial network as a profound sociological role exit.
And the mission of this deep dive is to explore this highly specific, totally wild trajectory mapped out in the paper. We are looking at why the absolute most enthusiastic early adopters of an integrated digital financial system, the people who literally championed it to their friends and families, are now desperately trying to escape it.
Yes, and it's not easy.
No, not at all. And maybe more importantly, we're going to examine exactly how they are pulling off this modern-day vanishing act while a centralized AI watches their every single move. You, the listener, probably use digital payments right now. You might have used a biometric login this morning.
Almost certainly.
So this isn't some distant science fiction, right? This is the architecture of the present moment. Okay, let's unpack this. Before we can understand why people are fleeing into the digital wilderness, we have to understand the invisible fortress they are escaping from.
That's fortune.
The paper centers on something called the ABCD system. What exactly is that?
So the ABCD acronym is Dr. Williams' way of categorizing the 4 pillars of a fully integrated, state-backed financial architecture.
Okay.
The A stands for artificial intelligence in financial decisioning. And we need to be really clear about what that means. This isn't just a smart spreadsheet or a traditional credit score model.
Right, not just a FICO score.
Exactly. This is an opaque, continuous machine learning algorithm that decides your creditworthiness, detects fraud, and determines your fundamental eligibility for services in real time. And it's constantly updating based on millions of data points.
So it's basically an invisible judge that never sleeps, and you never get to see the rulebook?
Precisely. The rulebook is functionally written in a black box. Then there is B, which stands for biometric identification.
The face scans.
Yeah. This is the shift away from passwords or physical ID cards to biological realities. Fingerprints, facial geometry, iris scans. In the ABCD system, your biometrics become the absolute mandatory gateway to the economy. It's no longer just a way to unlock your device. Your body is your credential.
Which brings a whole new meaning to identity theft, but we'll get to that. What's the C?
C is central bank digital currency, or CBDC. And this requires a crucial distinction because people often confuse this with what they already have.
Yeah, I feel like people just think of Apple Pay or whatever.
Right, but a CBDC is not just the digital bank deposits you see when you open your current checking account app. Those are liabilities of a private commercial bank. A CBDC is programmable base money issued directly by a central bank. It is money made of code, and that code can carry conditional logic.
Wait, let me make sure I'm wrapping my head around this. Programmable money. So you're saying the issuer can retroactively decide my money isn't valid for a specific purchase.
Yes.
But that fundamentally breaks the historical social contract of what cash is.
It alters the ontology of money completely. Physical cash is bearer instrument money. If you hold it, you own it, and you can give it to anyone. Programmable CBDCs can be coded with specific rules.
Like what kind of rules?
Well, a government could issue a stimulus payment that is programmed to expire in 30 days to force economic velocity. Or they could program funds so they cannot be spent on high carbon footprint items or restrict them geographically so you can only spend them within your own zip code.
That is wild. The money itself has an opinion on how it gets spent. Okay, and the final pillar.
Finally, D is the digital control layer. This is the overarching integration of anti-money laundering protocols, international sanctions, and real-time transaction monitoring.
Ah, the compliance stuff.
Exactly. It is the compliance engine that ensures every transaction adheres to current legal and regulatory frameworks instantaneously.
So if we look around today individually, AI credit decisions, biometrics, digital currency research, and compliance layers, they all exist in some form right now. But the paper stresses that the integration of these four pillars is the whole ballgame. Why is the integration so much more dangerous than the individual parts?
What's fascinating here is that the integration creates a paradigm shift in control. Dr. Williams points out that in traditional systems, identity, transaction, and eligibility are distinct functions. They're usually handled by different entities.
Right. Your driver's license proves who you are, your bank processes the payment, and a merchant decides if you can buy the item.
Exactly.
Yes.
But in the ABCD system, a user doesn't experience an AI decision separately from a payment block. They don't experience a biometric scan separately from a compliance check. They experience a single, inescapable financial control surface.
It's all one thing.
Identity verification, transaction execution, and behavioral permission all happen in 1 microsecond, adjudicated by a single networked entity.
I was trying to visualize what it would actually feel like to live inside a perfectly integrated system like that, and it made me think of an ultra-modern amusement park.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, imagine you go to this incredible futuristic theme park, and to get in, they just scan your retina. That retina scan is now everything. It's your entry ticket, it's your wallet to buy food, it's your map, it's your VIP fast passes to skip the lines.
The ultimate frictionless environment.
Right. It is incredibly convenient. You don't have to carry a wallet. You don't have to worry about losing your tickets. You just look at a sensor and the world opens up for you.
Sure, until it doesn't.
Exactly. Imagine the park's central computer, the AI, decides, based on some opaque algorithmic rule, that your heart rate was too high on the last ride. Or you bought too many sodas, or you walked through a restricted zone. Suddenly, you walk up to buy a bottle of water, you scan your retina, and a red light flashes. Denied.
And this is where the integration becomes a cage. You can't just bypass it.
Because there is no teenager at a ticket booth to argue with. You can't just pull a crumpled $20 bill out of your pocket and hand it to a vendor. The physical infrastructure for alternative payment has been entirely removed to make way for the scanners. You are locked out of the experience by the exact same convenience that let you in.
That is a highly illustrative analogy. And we just have to ask the listener to scale that up. Imagine that amusement park is your entire life. Every cup of coffee bought, every paycheck received, every rent payment, every medical bill, all gated by a single biometric scan that you cannot alter, cannot leave at home, and cannot argue with if the algorithm flags you.
It's terrifying.
If the AI makes an opaque decision about your risk profile, your face just stops working at the grocery store.
Which is deeply unsettling. But that brings us to the core mystery that kicks off this whole paper. If this system has this absolute, terrifying level of centralized control, who on earth would willingly sign up for it? You would assume this would have to be forced on a population at gunpoint.
And that leads us to what Dr. Williams calls the paradox of the early enthusiast. You would intuitively think that the people voluntarily signing up for this in its early stages would be the ones who simply don't care about privacy, or people who prioritize convenience above all else.
Right, the early tech adopters who just want the shiny new thing.
But the sociological data shows the exact opposite.
The paper identifies two very distinct populations that react negatively to the system. First, there's the group called the resistant remnant. These are the 2 to 5% of the population who took one look at the ABCD system during its pilot phase and said, nope, absolutely not.
They refused from day one.
Yeah, they held on to their physical cash. They refused the biometric scanners. They took the penalty of being unbanked. But they aren't the focus of this research. The analytical focus of this paper is on a different group. The Disenchanted Dissenters. This is another 2 to 5% of the population. But these people joined willingly, enthusiastically, and now they are desperately trying to get out.
This raises an important question. Why did they join in the first place? Dr. Williams pulls from extensive survey experiment data, and the paradox is striking. The demographic most willing to adopt CDDCs and biometric gateways in the early pilot surveys were actually individuals who highly valued privacy, security, and independence from commercial banks.
Wait, I'm stuck on something. Why would hardcore privacy advocates, people who historically hate surveillance, be the early adopters of a state-backed digital tracking system? How does that logically compute?
It computes when you analyze how the system was originally pitched during its design phase. When the ABCD architecture was first proposed, it promised perfect cryptographic security.
Oh, I see.
The pitch was essentially, your data is currently being harvested and sold by dozens of private commercial banks, credit card companies, and tech monopolies. Move to our unified system, and it will be protected by unbreakable state cryptography.
So they pitched it as an upgrade to privacy.
Exactly. It promised financial inclusion, eliminating predatory bank fees. The privacy advocates genuinely believe the underlying mathematics would protect them from corporate surveillance.
It's the classic bait and switch. It's the difference between the glossy marketing brochure and the actual shipped product.
Precisely. When the deployment phase actually happened, those theoretical design features were compromised. For instance, when the biometric data started being aggregated with real-time location data and transaction histories to feed the AI risk models, the sense of betrayal for these early enthusiasts was acute.
Ouch.
They realized they hadn't bought into a secure vault, they'd built their own panopticon.
I really want to dwell on that moment of realization because the psychological agony of that has to be immense. Think about it on a relatable human scale. Have you ever championed a new piece of software at work?
Oh, absolutely.
You discover this new collaboration tool, you pitch it to your boss, you tell your whole team it's going to revolutionize how you all work, you basically force everyone to download it and migrate their projects over, and then 6 months later, you realize it is an absolute nightmare.
It never works as advertised.
Right, it crashes constantly, it deletes files, it ruins the workflow, but you can't admit it. You defend the software even when it's failing, because to admit it's garbage is to admit that you made a terrible judgment call that hurt your team.
That is a perfect encapsulation of the psychological friction at play here. The behavioral economics literature refers to this combination of forces as sunk costs and status quo bias. When you invest your reputation into a system, your brain will go to extraordinary lengths to rationalize its flaws.
Now multiply that office software scenario by your entire financial identity and your family's safety. If you are the tech-savvy person in your family who convinced your aging parents to migrate all their retirement assets into the ABCD system because you swore it was the mathematically sound future of money, admitting you led them into a surveillance trap is physically painful.
It requires a massive cognitive cost to process that reality. You aren't just changing your mind about a consumer app. You are acknowledging a catastrophic error in judgment regarding your family's fundamental security.
Yeah, that's heavy.
You have to admit that the utopia you believed in is actually a cage, which is why the realization that the system is flawed doesn't happen overnight. It is a grueling, protracted psychological journey.
So if someone...
Specifically, he leans heavily on Helen Rose Ebau's role exit theory, which is foundational to understanding this phenomenon. Ebau studied how people leave roles that are central to their self-identity.
Let's explore these 5 stages because they map perfectly onto human nature. Stage 1 is the enthusiastic embrace. This is the honeymoon phase. You have high loyalty.
Very high.
You are actively advocating for the ABCD system. You're the person at the dinner party lecturing your friends about the elegance of programmable money, telling them to just scan their irises and get with the times.
In this initial stage, the user's belief in the system is so strong that they unconsciously rationalize away any minor issues. The sheer convenience is high, and if anyone raises dystopian warnings about government control, the enthusiast dismisses them as paranoid Luddites. They are fully identified with their role as a modern, forward-thinking citizen.
But eventually, reality starts to creep in. That's stage 2, latent friction. The honeymoon is over, and dissatisfaction starts accumulating like dust. It's a period of intense cognitive dissonance.
Yes, exactly.
The system is showing its flaws, but you're still defending it to yourself. You go to buy a book that has been flagged as controversial, and the payment is mysteriously delayed. You tell yourself, oh, the AI just had a network bug. They'll patch it in the next update.
During stage 2, the user is doing heavy emotional labor to maintain their worldview. They are negotiating with their own discomfort. But cognitive dissonance can only be sustained for so long. Eventually, the rationalization breaks entirely. That brings us to stage 3, the tipping point event.
The moment the glass shatters.
Yes. A specific, undeniable event occurs that converts that latent friction into a recognized pattern of hostility. The user can no longer pretend the system has their best interests at heart.
And once you cross that tipping point, there is no going back to blissful ignorance. You enter stage 4, active reconsideration. This is where the panic and the planning set in. You are deliberately searching for alternatives.
It's a very active phase.
You start building what the paper calls bridging arrangements, which we will dive into deeply in a moment because they are incredibly risky. And crucially, this is where identity revision begins. You transition from being a citizen in good standing to an X-role information.
And finally, that preparation culminates in stage 5, defection and reincorporation. The individual severs substantive participation in the integrated system. They step off the grid, and they formally join a parallel community that operates outside the ABCD architecture.
Okay, I have to push back here because this is where the academic framing feels almost melodramatic. Quitting a piece of technology, even a really important financial app, is one thing. But you mentioned Ebaw's role exit theory. Ebaw's original research in the 1970s and 80s was famously about people leaving profound, life-altering, all-encompassing roles.
Like religious rules.
Yeah. She studied ex-nuns leaving the convent, ex-doctors who walked away from medicine, people undergoing major gender transitions. Are we really saying that migrating away from a central bank digital currency is sociologically on par with a nun abandoning her vows?
What's fascinating here is yes. The paper explicitly argues that it is entirely on par, and for a very specific reason. In the ABCD system, you aren't just changing your bank.
Okay, then what is it?
The system is so deeply woven into the fabric of daily life that your participation in it defines your status as a legitimate, functioning human being in that society. It dictates where you can live, what you can eat, who you can transact with. To leave it means you have to fundamentally reconstruct your entire relationship to society. You are choosing to become a system defector. You are essentially excommunicating yourself from modern convenience.
Wow, I see. If a nun leaves the convent, she has to figure out how to dress differently, how to speak to people outside the church, how to rebuild a social circle from scratch.
Exactly.
If you leave the ABCD system, you have to explain to your friends why you can't split the dinner bill on the app anymore. You have to explain why you can't fly on a plane with them for vacation. You're grieving the identity of the normal person you are leaving behind.
Precisely. You become an outsider in your own hometown. If we connect this to the bigger picture, Dr. Williams uses Albert Hirschman's classic economic framework of exit, voice, and loyalty. In a normal market economy, if you don't like a product or a service, you use your voice to complain.
Right.
You leave a scathing Yelp review, you email customer service, you vote for a different board of directors, you try to fix the system from within.
But in the ABCD system, voice is completely useless.
Yeah.
Because there is no customer service. It's an opaque AI. You can't write a strongly worded letter to a machine learning algorithm that has decided you are a 72% compliance risk based on your metadata.
Exactly. Because the avenue of voice is structurally denied by the architecture of the system itself, the user is left with a binary choice. Their loyalty eventually fractures and flips entirely to exit. When you cannot speak to power, your only option is to walk away from it.
But what actually causes that fracture? We know stage 3 is the tipping point. But what does a tipping point look like in daily life? It turns out not all defectors are created equal. People break for different reasons. The paper identifies 4 distinct flavors of defectors, or cohorts, based on the specific catalyst that pushes them over the edge.
The first cohort is the privacy-triggered defector. For these individuals, the tipping point is usually a sudden, catastrophic revelation. It might be a massive data leak that the government tried to cover up.
Like a major scandal.
Or a whistleblower reveals that biometric data, which was promised to be securely siloed, was actually being routinely shared across intelligence agencies without consent. Because this user originally bought into the system for its promised cryptographic privacy, this violation strikes at their core ideological values. When they realize the math was a lie, their progression through the stages of exit is usually explosive and very fast.
They see the man behind the curtain, and they run for the exits. Then you have the second cohort, the service failure triggered defector. This one is very concrete and highly instrumental. This isn't about grand philosophy, this is about utility. You are driving across the country, you stop for gas in the middle of nowhere, you scan your face, and your account is frozen.
A literal nightmare.
Right, or the AI glitches and denies a critical medical transaction for your child.
For this group, the abstract debate about surveillance doesn't matter nearly as much as reliability. The system promised perfect, frictionless convenience, and it failed to deliver the service. Once the system proves itself to be unreliable or dangerously capricious, the instrumental user seeks a more robust alternative simply to guarantee their own survival.
The third cohort is deeply fascinating and requires a lot of nuance to discuss properly. This is the political and identity-triggered defector. The tipping point here is when the ABCD system is visibly weaponized against a co-identified population. For example, if the system uses its compliance layer to publicly debank or freeze the assets of a specific ideological group, a religious minority, or a protest movement.
Yes, and I want to pause here to frame this through the strictly academic lens provided by the source material. Dr. Williams analyzes this trigger purely from a sociological perspective. Regardless of where anyone might stand on the domestic politics of the groups that experience these asset freezes, the academic data reveals a clear, predictable psychological outcome. We're examining the mechanics of social rupture, not endorsing the politics of the defectors.
Right, absolutely. We need to be super clear on that. The show's stance is completely neutral. We're just reading the psychological data. And what the data says is that when a user sees the system actively deployed to crush a group they identify with, even if they themselves weren't individually targeted, it produces the absolute deepest, most radicalized commitment to leaving. It is a profound identity rupture.
Because it shatters the illusion of neutrality. It proves that the system's coercive capability isn't just a theoretical vulnerability. It is an active weapon, and it is capable of being directed at them based purely on their affiliations.
And finally, we have the fourth cohort, gradual fatigue. There is no dramatic movie moment here, no single trigger, no frozen bank account, no leaked memo. It's just surveillance fatigue.
Yeah, just exhaustion.
It's the daily, exhausting, low-level anxiety of knowing you are constantly being monitored, scored, and evaluated by a machine. The paper notes this is actually the largest group numerically, but they are by far the slowest to leave. It's the classic boiling frog syndrome.
They dwell in stage 2, that latent friction, for a very, very long time. They adapt to the rising temperature of surveillance, making small concessions, altering their behavior slightly to avoid algorithmic flags, until one day the psychological burden of constantly self-censoring simply outweighs the convenience of the system.
So what does this all mean? It means that depending on what triggered you, your emotional state and your timeline for escape are going to look very different. But here is the truly terrifying part of Dr. Williams' analysis. The ABCD system doesn't just sit back passively and watch you pack your bags.
Far from it.
It is a dynamic network. It has a built-in algorithmic immune system designed specifically to detect your dissatisfaction and stop you at stage 3 or 4 before you can actually pull off a defection.
And this institutional retention apparatus is chillingly effective because it has perfect visibility into your life. Dr. Williams categorizes the system's automated responses into 4 mechanisms, scaling from gentle manipulation to overt force: the positive smile, the negative smile, the bark, and the bite.
Let's start with the smiles, which sound friendly but are deeply manipulative. The positive smile is algorithmic appeasement. It is tailored convenience. The system makes it incredibly seductively easy to stay. It defaults to your preferences.
Yeah.
If the AI detects that you are a privacy-triggered person who's getting nervous, maybe you've been reading articles about data leaks, the system might proactively target you with a pop-up offering new privacy-enhanced features or a slightly better interest rate to soothe your anxiety.
It's a customized automated retention strategy designed to reset your cognitive dissonance. But if the carrot doesn't work, the system deploys the stick, softly at first. That is the negative smile. This is the gradual, quiet withdrawal of your outside alternatives.
So they just make it harder to leave.
Exactly. The system doesn't punish you directly, it just makes it increasingly impossible to live outside its borders. Physical cash acceptance at major retailers subtly declines. Alternative peer-to-peer apps are slowly regulated out of existence or hit with massive compliance fees. It's the slow, imperceptible withdrawal of oxygen from the parallel economy.
Then comes the bark. This is where the system shows its teeth, but it does it at a distance. The bark is the use of public demonstration cases. The authorities heavily publicize an account freeze, a tax audit, or the debanking of a prominent defector. They make a loud, visible example out of someone else so that everyone currently lingering in stage 4 sees it on the news and gets the message.
The bark relies heavily on classical deterrence theory. The system administrators know they don't have the resources to manually punish everyone who wants to leave. But they don't have to. They just need everyone to know that punishment is possible, that it is operationally swift, and that it destroys your social standing.
And if you ignore the bark and you keep trying to build your bridge to the outside world, you get the bite. Actual targeted account freezes, regulatory enforcement actions, criminal process initiation. The system reaches out and financially paralyzes you.
It's the ultimate enforcement action.
But here is the question that kept me up reading this paper. How does a centralized computer system know when to bite? How does it know you are planning to leave before you actually do? This brings us to what might be the most dystopian concept in the entire text.
The AI defection risk score.
This part is staggering. The system is continuously calculating in real time the exact mathematical probability that you are trying to defect.
Because the ABCD system integrates your artificial intelligence profile, your biometric physical movements, your programmable currency usage, and your compliance history, it has virtually perfect visibility into the minutiae of your behavior.
So it sees everything.
Yes. The paper details 5 specific data vectors or signals that the AI monitors continuously to calculate your flight risk. First, transactional signals. The AI isn't just looking for illegal purchases, it's looking for changes in your economic volume. Are you suddenly converting large amounts of your digital CBDC into tangible physical goods?
Right. If I normally spend $100 a week on groceries and suddenly I start buying thousands of dollars of non-perishable food, water filters, or physical gold coins, the AI sees that anomaly instantly.
Second are identity signals. Are you suddenly opting out of the optional biometric convenience features you used to use every day? Are you using privacy masking tools or logging in from unusual off-grid locations? Third are network signals. And this is vital.
Who you know.
Exactly. Who are you communicating and transacting with? Are you suddenly sending money to individuals who have high defection risk scores themselves or who are known members of parallel communities?
It's guilt by financial association. If I start splitting a bar tab with a known cypherpunk, my own risk score goes up.
Exactly. It maps the social graph of dissent. Fourth are content signals. What media are you consuming? What are your search patterns? Are you downloading white papers on self-custody cryptography or researching rural real estate? And fifth, biographical signals. The AI monitors major life events that historically correlate with defection.
Like getting married or fired.
Did you just experience a sudden job loss? Did you move to a new jurisdiction? Did you recently get divorced? The AI aggregates all of these micro-behaviors to calculate a dynamic, real-time risk score.
I was trying to find an analogy for how this feels, and it's essentially like being trapped in a toxic relationship where your deeply insecure partner is secretly reading your diary every night.
Oh, that's a good comparison.
They're analyzing your private thoughts to figure out exactly what gifts to buy you. That's the positive smile to manipulate you into staying. And if they realize the gifts aren't working and you are genuinely planning to break up with them, they start locking the doors, hiding your car keys, and threatening you the bite. I want you, the listener, to just stop and consider your own digital exhaust for a second.
That's a lot more than you think.
Think about how many signals you emit daily. Every web search, every swipe of a card, every location ping on your phone, every person you text. In the ABCD system, a centralized AI is using all of that trivial daily friction to mathematically predict your loyalty to the state.
And this brings us to the ultimate operational paradox for the disenchanted dissenter. You are sitting in stage 4. You want out, but you know the AI is watching your every move, updating your risk score by the millisecond, and the system is ready to bite if you cross the threshold. How do you actually get out without triggering the trap?
You can't just flip a switch, withdraw all your money, and disappear into the woods. The system would freeze your account before the transfer even cleared. You have to build a bridge while you're still standing on a burning platform, and you have to do it without drawing attention. The paper refers to these strategies as bridging arrangements.
It's a dangerous game.
These are partial exit configurations. You essentially have to live a double life for months or years.
And this is exactly why the preparation stage is the most dangerous phase of the entire defection trajectory. If you migrate your assets too quickly, the AI flags your transactional velocity and triggers the bite. If you build your informal networks too, obviously, the network analysis algorithm catches you. It requires an incredible amount of psychological resilience and operational stealth.
So Dr. Williams outlines exactly what these bridging arrangements look like in practice. First, defectors seek out parallel payment rails. They start scavenging for whatever physical cash is left in circulation. They engage in peer-to-peer bartering. They use prepaid gift cards or decentralized cryptocurrencies that aren't tied to their biometric identity. They are basically finding the shadows in a very brightly lit room.
Then they engage in what the paper calls mixed substrate participation. This is the essence of the double life. You must keep a foot in both worlds to avoid detection. You intentionally keep your ABCD account active enough to look like a compliant citizen. You use your biometric scan to buy your daily coffee, pay your utility bills, and pay your taxes, ensure your AI risk score remains low. But simultaneously, you are moving your real economic surplus, your savings, into the parallel economy.
You're feeding the algorithm just enough boring data to keep it sedated, which leads to partial asset migration. You slowly, quietly, over a period of years, bleed your wealth into non-compliant stores of value.
Gold, silver, things like that.
Right. You buy a few silver coins at a time. You invest in tangible assets like tools or land. You move capital into jurisdictions that refuse to plug into the global ABCD architecture.
Simultaneously, the defector practices selective biometric opt-outs and identity minimization. You stop volunteering new data. You decline the optional facial recognition upgrades. You give the system the absolute bare minimum required to function legally, starving the AI of high-fidelity data.
And finally, there is informal network construction. You can't survive outside the system alone, so you start making preemptive alliances with people in the destination community you want to join. But you have to do it analog. You have to meet them in person, quietly, so the digital network analysis doesn't flag your new friendships. It is literally a Cold War spy movie, but the stakes are your checking account and your ability to buy groceries.
It is a high-stakes, exhausting operational maneuver. The cognitive load of maintaining two separate financial realities is immense. But let's assume the dissenter navigates this gauntlet successfully. They manage their risk score, they migrate their assets, they cross the bridge, and they sever their ties with the ABCD system. Where do they actually land?
Right, because you aren't just leaving a system, you have to go somewhere. You can't just float in a void. You are reincorporating into a new system. And to explain how this works, Dr. Williams introduces a brilliant conceptual tool called the pentagonal framework.
The pentagonal framework outlines the 5 interacting variables that determine where a defector ultimately ends up and how successful their exit is. It's not just the elements constantly push and pull against each other.
Okay, what are they?
First, the specific ABCD system design. How authoritarian is the system you are fleeing? Second, the incentive and threat apparatus. How hard is the system trying to stop you? Third, the defector's resources. This is critical. Does the person fleeing have the capital, the technical skills, and the mental fortitude to survive outside the mainstream? A wealthy software engineer has vastly different options than a lower-income retail worker.
Makes sense.
Fourth, the defector's decision and choice parameters. What is their personal threshold for hardship? And fifth, the available parallel communities. What ecosystems actually exist to catch them?
That fifth variable is fascinating. What are these parallel communities? Where are these digital refugees actually going? The paper maps out the destination substrates, and the list is an incredibly bizarre mix of bedfellows. First, you have religious communities. You see a massive influx of defectors joining Anabaptist groups, plain Christians like the Amish or Mennonites, traditional Catholic enclaves, and observant Jewish communities. These are groups that already possess a rich, centuries-old history of living somewhat apart from mainstream secular systems, with their own robust internal mutual aid networks.
Then you have the purely ideological substrates. You have libertarian and civil libertarian intentional communities grounded in political philosophy and mutual defense of property rights. You have the cypherpunk and self-custody communities who rely not on physical isolation, but on advanced, decentralized cryptographic infrastructure to remain completely invisible and off the grid while still participating in global networks.
And then there's one more, right?
Yes. Finally, you have communitarian or diaspora networks, which are based on shared ethnic, regional, or familial loyalties that supersede allegiance to the state.
It is wild to visualize this. You have high-tech cypherpunks trading encrypted digital tokens living right next door in this new sociological landscape to traditional religious communities trading physical silver and farming equipment. They have completely diametrically opposed worldviews on almost everything, theology, morality, technology, but they are united by their absolute, uncompromising rejection of the ABCD system. They are neighbors in exile.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it is a brilliant sociological phenomenon. The enemy of my enemy is my trading partner. But these parallel communities are not just open doors waiting to embrace anyone who hates the government. They have strict defense mechanisms of their own. Because they exist under constant threat from the overarching system, they require what the paper calls substrate alignment.
I really want to break that term down because it sounds like chemistry, but it's deeply human. Substrate alignment means you can't just be running from the ABCD system. You have to genuinely believe in what the parallel community stands for.
Precisely. If an Anabaptist farming community takes in a Silicon Valley tech bro who just happens to be mad about a CBDC tax policy, that tech bro is a massive liability. If things get hard, or if the ABCD system offers him a positive smile and a tax break, he will abandon the community and potentially expose their networks.
So how do they test for that?
They enforce rigorous discernment periods. They test the defectors. They require them to learn the theology or master the cryptography or contribute manual labor to the community. They need to ensure that defectors aren't undercover infiltrators sent by the system to map their networks, and they need to prove they aren't just fair-weather fans. You have to prove you belong to the new world, not just that you hate the old one.
So we have this incredibly intense dynamic standoff. You have an all-seeing AI system trying to retain its population, and you have highly motivated defectors sneaking out the back door to join radical parallel communities. What is the end game here? Does the ABCD system eventually collapse because everyone wakes up and leaves? Or do the defectors all get hunted down and crushed by the system's bite?
Historically, neither of those extreme outcomes occurs. And this is where Dr. Williams' systems-level analysis is so strong. He outlines 4 institutional response modes available to the system operators, which eventually lead to a steady-state equilibrium, a tense but stable truce.
The 4 responses the state can take are accommodation, isolation, incentive reversal, and coercion.
Coercion is obvious. It's using the bite to systematically crush the defectors, seizing their assets and outlawing their communities. Incentive reversal is the system acknowledging it pushed too hard and trying to win people back by structurally restoring privacy or removing the programmable restrictions on the currency.
What's isolation?
Isolation is letting the defectors leave, but aggressively containing them in physical or digital ghettos so their ideas can't influence anyone else. But the most historically successful strategy for durable, long-lasting regimes is accommodation.
Which basically means just letting them go, ignoring them.
Yes. Accommodation is a calculated release of pressure. It means letting a small, manageable, statistically insignificant fraction of people leave in order to preserve the system's overall legitimacy. Think about it strategically.
Okay.
If you deploy military police to crush a tiny minority of Amish farmers and cyberpunks who just want to trade silver and encrypt their hard drives, you look like a tyrant. You terrify the 80% of normal people who stayed in the system, and you erode your own legitimacy. But by letting 5% of the population live in the metaphorical woods, you create a release valve. You keep the other 95% content, compliant, and convinced that they are participating in a free society, because technically they could leave if they really wanted to.
So what do the actual numbers look like when the dust settles in this steady-state equilibrium?
In a mature deployment of an ABCD system, Dr. Williams estimates that 70 to 80% of the population falls into the stay category. They embrace the system, they love the convenience, they don't care about the surveillance, and they're perfectly content. Another 10 to 15% fall into the tragic category of leave stay.
Oh man, the leave stays, those are the disenchanted people who desperately want out, but they are trapped. They don't have the resources to build the bridge, or their defection risk score got too high and they were paralyzed by the bark and the bite. They are awake to the cage, but they can't pick the lock.
Yes, the trapped minority living in perpetual cognitive dissonance. Then you have the 2 to 5% who are the disenchanted dissenters, the people who successfully navigated the bridge and escaped. And another 2 to 5% are the ab initio remnant, the people who never joined in the first place and were waiting in the parallel communities all along.
And the paper points out that this bifurcated equilibrium, a massive compliant mainstream, existing alongside a tiny, resilient shadow economy, is actually perfectly consistent with historical mandate regimes. Dr. Williams uses several historical benchmarks to model this systemic resistance.
And again, it is vital to explicitly contextualize this. Dr. Williams looks at these historical events strictly from an economic and sociological perspective to map human behavior under stress. Regardless of the geopolitical context or the differing ideologies behind these historical events, the academic data reveals a consistent pattern of human defection. We are examining the mechanics of parallel economies, not taking a stance on the domestic policies of these specific nations.
Exactly right. We want to be totally clear about our neutrality on this. As historical data points for how systems and populations interact during financial stress, the paper cites the 1933 U.S. gold confiscation, where private citizens were mandated to surrender their physical gold to the central bank, but a predictable minority simply buried it in their backyards. It cites the 2015 Greek capital controls, where citizens were locked out of cross-border access to their funds, spawning massive local barter networks. The 2019 Lebanese banking collapse, which forced almost the entire country into an informal, cash and crypto parallel economy to survive. The 2022 Canadian emergency measures, which utilized the banking system to execute rapid account freezes on protesters, instantly driving millions of dollars into decentralized custody. And the 2023 Nigerian Naira pushback, where public resistance and preference for physical cash severely limited the adoption of a massive government CBDC initiative.
In every single one of those historical episodes, a dominant system asserted control, tightened its grip on the financial architecture, and a predictable, mathematically consistent fraction of the population found ways to maneuver outside it, building bridges to parallel substrates. The ABCD system we've discussed today is just the most technologically advanced, highly integrated iteration of a very old, very human dynamic.
It really is. Okay, let's step back and look at the profound journey we just took. We started with the utopian promises of AI and central bank digital currencies, perfect inclusion, zero friction, perfect security. We looked at the paradox of the early enthusiast, exploring the psychological agony of the privacy advocates who fell into the trap and realized they helped build their own cage.
A difficult realization.
We walked through the harrowing five-stage exit, from the quiet rationalization of latent friction to the shattering moment of the tipping point. We saw the terrifying algorithmic immune system, the positive smile, the bark and the bite, calculating your loyalty in real time. And we explored the incredibly risky bridging arrangements required to escape into those fascinating parallel communities waiting on the other side.
It is a profound reminder that advanced technology doesn't eliminate fundamental human behavior. It just drastically escalates the stakes. The desire for autonomy always finds a substrate to grow on, even if it has to grow in the shadows.
For you listening, even if you absolutely love your digital convenience today, even if you love tapping your phone to buy your coffee, and the idea of worrying about a CBDC sounds exhausting, understanding this trajectory is vital, because technology continuously, imperceptibly shifts the invisible boundary between convenience and coercion. What is a delightful feature today can easily become an inescapable fence tomorrow.
And recognizing exactly where that fence is being built and who holds the keys to the gate is the very first step in deciding whether you truly want to live inside it.
Which leaves me with one final lingering question to ponder, a thought experiment to take with you as you go about your day. We've talked extensively today about how individuals manage to escape into these parallel communities. We've talked about cypherpunks and Anabaptists relying on physical cash, precious metals, and tangible assets to build a life off the grid. But as the physical world and the digital world become perfectly, seamlessly integrated, what happens when there is no physical outside left to escape to?
That is the ultimate existential bottleneck for these communities.
Right. If a parallel community relies on physical cash or tangible goods to survive, what happens when the ABCD system simply ceases to recognize the existence of offline value entirely? What if the scanner at the grocery store doesn't just reject your fingerprint, but the physical grocery store itself structurally cannot process a non-digital ledger? There are no cash registers, no slots for coins.
Scary thought.
Do these parallel communities just become digital ghosts, invisible to the rest of the physical world? Or do they eventually have to build an entirely separate physical internet, a shadow infrastructure of roads, farms, and factories just to keep their families fed?
We always operate under the assumption that we can just step off the grid. But what happens if the grid becomes the ground itself?
What happens when the amusement park paves over the forest? Usually when we talk about convenience, there's this expectation of a straight line pointing up. But it turns out if you follow that line far enough, without ever looking over your shoulder, it just might draw a perfect circle right around you. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into the source material. We genuinely love unpacking this stuff with you.
It's been an absolute pleasure. Keep questioning the systems you interact with every day.
We'll catch you next time.